Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for. One of these games has felt as big and as important as the one that we're about to get Saturday. And I think we know what the conversation is going into this game where Alabama is a 7-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. The conversation, it's pretty straightforward. It is, will Bryce Young play for Alabama? And if he does, and if he doesn't, what does it mean for the outcome of this game? And so when I look at this game, that is obviously the conversation. But I'm just going to get straight to the point, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think that we are actually looking at the conversation about Bryce Young wrong, and I think it leads me to this. I'm going to get straight to it. I'm going to tell you, you come here for strong opinions. I actually think Tennessee is going to win on Saturday and win regardless of whether Bryce Young plays. That's not totally a knock on Alabama. That's not totally credit to Tennessee, but let me explain why. First of all, when it comes to Bryce Young, kind of quick update, right? Hurts his shoulder against Arkansas, doesn't play last Saturday against Texas A&M. And then this week, Nick Saban for the last really 2 weeks, dating back to the Arkansas game, he's been pretty coy with the Bryce Young news. And I don't get the sense that he's doing it purposely or to manipulate us. I just think he doesn't know. I really think it is a game time deal, a day-to-day thing. And Nick Saban used the word pitch count to describe Bryce Young's situation the other day. Pitch count essentially being like a pitcher where, yeah, he can go if you need him to, but you might only throw him 50 pitches instead of letting him go 100. You might let him only throw 4 or 5 innings instead of letting him go 9. And that's where Bryce Young appears to be. Like, he can probably play if he needs to, but it doesn't feel as though he's 100%. And so to me, when I look at kind of the 30,000-foot view on Bryce Young, I think we have to look at it from 3 different perspectives. The perspective where he plays and he's 100% healthy, the perspective where he plays and he's at less than 100%, and the perspective that he doesn't play at all. And so as we get more information, as we get deeper into the week, I think we can just go ahead. And again, I don't claim to be a doctor, but I'm just reading the tea leaves. I'm reading what Nick Saban says. I think we can go ahead and eliminate the idea that he's going to play at 100%. Don't claim to be a doctor. Not saying I am. I'm just saying if he is not practicing at 100% on Wednesday, I find it very hard to believe that by Saturday, middle of the day, he's going to be 100% like it's week 1 and he's fresh as daisies. I just don't buy that. And so when you start to look at the situation, the question then becomes, what is Alabama with Bryce Young at less than 100% if he plays at all? Let's work under the assumption that he plays, because I think if he doesn't play, I think that makes it even more likely that Alabama is not able to win this game. But even if he does play, I think this is the part of the equation that people have gotten wrong all week. I think all week people are saying, what if Bryce Young doesn't play? Here's my question, though. What if he plays and he's not at 100%? Because I think that's probably where we're trending on Saturday, and I think that could be bad news for Alabama. Listen, Bryce Young is an incredible talent. He might be the most talented quarterback in college football right now. But at the same time, part of what makes Bryce Young is he can do things he can't coach. He can make plays on the run. He can make plays with his feet. He can make throws across his body at weird angles, this, that. And I guess what I wonder going into Saturday is Nick Saban going to let him be that guy? Like, if he plays, I don't think Nick Saban's going to want him running around like crazy trying to make plays with his feet. And so when you look at Alabama with Bryce Young at less than 100%, that's a completely different Alabama. And I do wonder if even if Bryce Young plays, if Nick Saban, again, pulls back the reins and almost says, look, I think Nick Saban is very smart about all of this stuff. Even if Bryce Young plays, I think, one, it obviously gives Alabama a much better chance to win. But 2, I think Nick Saban understands the big picture, 30,000, what it all means if Bryce Young, something were to happen in this game, right? 1, I think Nick Saban is going to pull back the reins because he wants to protect Bryce Young. We just saw it 3-4 years ago with Tua, where Tua begged back into a game against Mississippi State. His hip gets hurt really bad, and we thought it might be a career-ending injury. So I don't think Nick Saban wants that again. I think he wants to protect his player, but then also I think he wants to protect the season as well. And when I look at what Nick Saban is probably thinking going into this game, this is what I believe Nick Saban is thinking, because it's what I'm thinking. It's what most of you are thinking. Alabama can still win a national championship if Bryce Young plays, but Alabama does not win this game. Alabama cannot win a championship if they don't have Bryce Young going forward. And so that's the first part to me. I don't think either Bryce Young doesn't play, or I think he is very limited in what they allow him to do, because Nick Saban's sitting there saying, we can lose this game and come back. What we can't do is lose Bryce Young for the season. Then we're in a lot of trouble. The second part about why I do like Tennessee, I think we got to talk about Alabama outside of Bryce Young. Now, on paper, all the pieces feel good. And I do give credit to Alabama because some of these other guys have emerged outside of Bryce Young. Jahmyr Gibbs has been unbelievable the last 2-3 weeks, picking up in his absence. The defensive line, the defensive front, I think the defense is really underrated because we spend so much time talking about Bryce Young and the offense. But there are concerns with this team. And to be honest, I think even Alabama fans would admit this. Alabama's not playing winning football right now. You know who's saying that? Nick Saban said that. We talked about that on Thursday's show. Did you hear his press conference earlier this week where he basically said, before we can start making winning plays, we have to stop. We have to learn how to stop making losing plays. And you look at this Alabama team, and it's no disrespect to the players, and it's no disrespect to the coaching staff. They're just not playing winning football right now. What did I tell you a few days ago? This is a team that currently, as I record here, they rank 117th nationally in turnover margin. Does that sound like a team that's going to go on to win a championship to you? And I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying it has to get cleaned up. And when you're going in a hostile road environment with a quarterback that's at best injured, at worst not playing, you can't be a team that turns the ball over a lot. Just one problem. What did I just say? 117th in turnover margin. Turning the ball over at a fairly high rate. Now, part of it was they turned the ball over 4 times last week against Texas A&M. But then on top of that, this is the crazy part. They're not forcing any turnovers at all themselves. Go back and look. They forced 3 turnovers this year. That is unbelievable, especially when you consider they played a backup quarterback against Texas A&M. They essentially played a backup quarterback for 3 quarters against Texas. So maybe against the 2 best teams you played, or 2 out of the 3 if you include Arkansas in the mix, you played most of that time against the backup quarterback. And so when I look at this Alabama situation, forget Bryce Young. This is a team that is turning the ball over too much, isn't forcing enough turnovers. And then on top of that, you add the penalties. Like, this is unbelievable. This is not the Alabama team that we know. Alabama has been in the top 25 in turnover margin each of the last 3 years. I looked it up. They're one of the best in the country at it. But they're turning the ball over too much. They're not forcing enough turnovers. And here's the crazy part. That's on top of all the penalties. I remember talking about this after the Texas game. Remember the Texas game? Alabama, so many penalties, so many dumb mistakes, 15 total penalties, which was a record in the Nick Saban era. Fast forward, you think it got better? They had 10 penalties against Arkansas. So in their 2 road games this year, their 2 true road games, they have a combined 25 penalties, 12 and a half penalties per game. You do that against Tennessee. You have even 7 or 8, forget 12 and a half. You have 7, 8 penalties. You give them an extra 50, 60, 70, 80, 95 yards. You're not winning this game. And the final reason I like Tennessee, I'll just tell you, Hendon Hooker. Isn't he kind of the prototype of the guys that have beaten Alabama in the past? I mean, think about the quarterbacks that have given Nick Saban trouble through the years. Deshaun Watson, Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, Joe Burrow, Chad Kelly. I mean, you could go on and on down the list. What do they all have in common? They're guys that can make plays with their arm. They're guys that can make plays with their feet. And if you just listen to Nick Saban throughout this week, you could hear his respect for Josh Heupel, his respect for Hendon Hooker, his respect for this Tennessee offense. And you look at Hendon Hooker, he's the perfect quarterback to pull off the upset against Alabama. Super accurate, doesn't make mistakes. 70% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I believe the stat's something like 42 touchdowns, 2 interceptions since he's been named starter. I've lost track of how many exactly. But a ton of touchdowns, no interceptions this year. And here's the other thing. He can make plays with his legs. In the biggest game of the year, when they needed him to move outside of the pocket, 100-plus rushing yards against Anthony Richardson. And so I could go on and on. And there are places, by the way, where Alabama has advantages. That defensive front is going to be the best defensive front that Tennessee sees all year. There's other variables as well. And maybe Bryce Young is 100%. But I think when you factor that based on the information we have right now, Bryce Young probably isn't 100%, with the fact that Alabama has been very mistake prone, turnover prone, penalty prone, even with Bryce Young in the lineup, and the fact that Hendon Hooker is the type of quarterback that gives Alabama fits, I am taking Tennessee to pull the upset on Saturday in Neyland Stadium. I'll say final score 31-28 Tennessee. I like Tennessee. I really, really, really do. I think Tennessee pulls off the upset on Saturday. I cannot believe I'm saying that.